The Maine Attorney General's office handles all of the state's murder and manslaughter cases, and they face a tough decision on the rare occasion that the murder suspect is a child. A juvenile who commits a crime may lack mental development, but imagine that child being thrown into an adult prison. There's real danger they might face abuse or be led deeper down the road of crime. Now, one family fought for the state to change the way it handles juvenile offenders guilty of murder, and they were the last ones that anyone expected to get involved. News Center's Samantha Edwards joins us now with this special report. Samantha.
Thanks, Chris. The loss of a child is unimaginable. Now imagine losing your child at the hands of another child. Ted Johnston and Marlene Thibodeau live with that nightmare, but they have managed to turn their grief into action.
It never gets better. Time doesn't heal. You just get better at dealing with it.
Marley Johnston was only 14 years old when she was beaten to death with a bat, a vicious murder even more shocking because it was at the hands of her neighbor, Patrick Armstrong, who was also 14. Marley is one of the victims of Maine's child killers.
Fortunately, they are rare in the state of Maine. But when they happen, of course, you know, they generate a lot of public interest.
Rare, yes, but Maine has had its fair share of juveniles committing murder. In 1993, 14-year-old Sherry Johnson stabbed her great-aunt more than 100 times. In 96, 14-year-old Brian Goodman shot and killed his 13-year-old sister after she called him stupid. And currently, there is an 11-year-old girl facing charges of manslaughter for allegedly killing 3-month-old Brooklyn Foss Greenaway.
We had 2 families destroyed that day.
Yeah. Marley Johnston's death shook many. It happened in a quiet, close-knit community. Marley and Patrick grew up only a few doors down.
We knew him as a very young babe, and we watched him grow.
This cold-blooded murder caused the state to decide to try Patrick as an adult, who was only 15 when he was convicted.
There were circumstances about that case where we felt that that the juvenile system was not adequate to deal.
The state wanted Patrick in custody for about 20 years. Within the juvenile system, offenders can only be kept until the age of 21, which would have been 6 years. But even with the horrendous nature of the crime, the thought of throwing a 15-year-old boy in an adult prison did not sit well with State Prosecutor Bill Stokes or Marley's parents.
We couldn't even bear to think of what might happen.
And they felt the same way that we did, that we wanted to balance his youth with the seriousness of the offense.
It was during the Patrick Armstrong case where the state saw a flaw in the way it handled juvenile offenders. What they wanted was for Patrick to serve a blended or bind-over sentence, which simply means allowing him to serve the first part of his sentence in a juvenile facility like this one before entering an adult prison.
It's not just about throwing people in jail. A lot of it is about that. But, you know, when you're dealing with a young offender, you really have to be aware that maybe that person has to pay the price, but needs some time to make that transition.
Juvenile facilities offer rehabilitation programs, giving the juveniles a chance to grow both mentally and physically. They're put into therapy to get to the root of the problem and encouraged to continue their education. All of this in hopes of keeping them from reoffending. In Patrick's case, the stakes were too high to just toss him behind bars.
We wanted to make sure that if there was any hope at all for Patrick, that he would have that opportunity.
The state created a special sentence for Patrick, allowing him to serve a juvenile sentence for burglary before beginning his sentence for Marley's death. Both sides hoped this would allow the troubled youth to rehabilitate and mature, so that he didn't become a throwaway child. Marley's parents agreed, and even after all the hurt and pain, pushed for a bind-over.
I was angry. I was confused, sometimes still. But didn't want to be vengeful.
Marley's parents went before state lawmakers to push for a new law so that offenders like Patrick had a chance to be saved. The law highlights only the most heinous crimes, like murder. Under the law, a juvenile under 16 facing an adult charge can more easily attain a bind-over sentence. The child can serve the first part of their term in a youth center until the age of 18, where they will be transferred to an adult prison.
There's a way of protecting that person, but also, you know, an effort to say, well, society has an interest in this person's future, Because at some point, the person's going to get out. You're not going to, he's not going to be in there for life.
The Johnstons say it was not for Patrick that they helped put the law in place, but as parents, they wanted to salvage as many children as they can, although theirs could never be brought back.
There's no closure. That's, I think, for me, there's no closure. Every moment of every day, I hurt from my loss of my daughter.
That day, 2 childhoods came to an end, but now one has been given a chance at redemption.
Quite the compelling story.
Yeah, it's amazing that the compassion they obviously have, and you can obviously tell that they were very conflicted about it.
Yeah. Now, the Johnston family continues to hold events and scholarships in Marley's name to keep her memory alive. And Chris, getting back to the law, it has not been used since they put it in place. But Bill Stokes tells me, one, he hopes he never has to use it, but it's just another tool to salvage a juvenile if they find themselves in Patrick's place.
Well, now, and speaking of Patrick, where is he actually serving right now?
Patrick is being held at the Maine Correctional Center. He did spend time in the Charleston Youth Development Center till he was 18 years old, and then he was transferred. And now tomorrow we'll have part 2 of our series where I sit down with Patrick himself, and for the first time he discusses his experience in incarceration, and what he says might surprise you, so make sure you tune in.
Okay, we'll definitely check that out. Thanks very much for that report, Samantha.